Do you want a no-fail system for making sure that your New Year's resolution is successful this year? Well, you're in the right place. Why should you listen to me? Because I do every single thing I ever say I'm gonna do. Yes, I've written 7 books, 2 of them are published and 3 of them are coming out this year. The rest, they're gonna have to wait until 2026. But it's gonna happen. Last year, I started a new business and lost 70 pounds at the same time, while also writing 2 of those books and setting up a whole new framework. I'm not here to brag. I'm just telling you, I have a system that works and I'm gonna teach you how to do it. All right, let's get started. You've all heard the statistics about how many people failed their New Year's resolutions. It's gotten so bad that a lot of people don't even say resolution anymore because it's become almost meaningless. You see people stop, they hit a hiccup, and then they don't go back. It's the same thing at the gym. If you regularly go to the gym, you know that there's this huge January bump, and by February, all of the newbies are gone. I actually don't want that. I want you to succeed at your resolution. And if it happens to be the gym, I'll deal with the fact that the gym's more crowded for longer if it means people are actually succeeding in what they want in their lives. That's what I'm here for. I want everybody to be successful. The first thing you need to do is make sure that your plan, yes, I know planning is boring, but if you don't plan for success, then you're planning to fail. That's the way it is. So you should have a plan on how you're implementing your New Year's resolution already. By the time you see this video, it's almost mid-January, so I'm sure that you do have a plan. But let's talk about what's gonna make that plan work versus all the people who fall off. When you make your plan, you need to have a contingency plan for when circumstances aren't perfect. I'm gonna keep using the gym example because it's easy, but I'll also sprinkle in a few other examples for the more nebulous portions of your life because those matter too. But let's talk about the gym. You want to go X number of times a week. Hopefully you've set a number of times per week. Now, what you don't want to do is say, I'm gonna go on these exact days and then miss those days and then stop going. That is one of the reasons people fall apart when it comes to gym resolutions, is if they can't do it perfectly, then they just stop doing it. So what you want to do is be prepared to do it imperfectly in your plan and with your contingency plan. So if you say that you're going to go X number of times a week and you know which days are the best days to go, then your backup plan is going on the days that aren't perfect and making sure that you can. Another backup plan is we're about to have this huge freeze in Texas. So while I go to the gym a certain number of times a day, my backup plan for this week, when the gym might be closed, the roads might be icy, so even if it's not closed, I may not feel safe driving there. My backup plan is I have 2 workout video channels that I really like. I don't use them primarily because I do prefer to either go outside and work out or go to the gym, but I know that if it's freezing cold, I'm just not going to do that. So my imperfect plan is to make sure that I do either yoga with Adriene or my indoor walking videos, which may sound cheesy, but trust me, some of them work up a sweat. And that's what matters at the end of the day. It's not that you do it perfectly, it's that you do something. So if your goals are related to health and fitness, make sure you know what you're going to do when circumstances aren't perfect, which is having an at-home routine as your backup and having a food backup. So yes, we might be iced in this week, so I need to make sure I know what my meal plan is if my normal things I do won't work out. I'm gonna admit it, I'm lazy. I get a rotisserie chicken twice a week and that's mostly what I eat for protein. So I might not be able to get my midweek rotisserie chicken, so I might have to actually cook some chicken this week. So there's chicken in the freezer. That's my contingency plan. You don't want your contingency plan to be ordering fast food, or you don't want to not have a contingency plan so you're forced to order fast food. So that is if your goal is related to health and fitness. It's super easy. These are just examples of what a contingency plan looks like, right? But the other thing that's inherent to having a successful plan around your New Year's resolution or whatever your goal is for this year is also making sure that it's integrated into your lifestyle in a sustainable way. So one of the main ways people fall apart is that they set this super ambitious goal for the year and their plan on how they're going to achieve that is frankly unrealistic. What do I mean by unrealistic? Is they decide they're going to do it in a way that's not sustainable. That can look like one of 2 things. So first of all, make sure that you are prioritizing what your new goal is. Make sure that you have a sustainable plan around that goal. An unsustainable plan would be, let's say you're an evening person and you've decided you're going to wake up at 3:30 every morning and work on your Great American Novel. I'm so sorry. Very few people can actually sustain waking up at 3:30 in the morning. So if you you plan that and it doesn't work, what are you going to do? I don't mind if you actually try to rearrange your schedule in a meaningful way. And even if it seems unrealistic, I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm honestly not. Some people can sustain a major schedule change like that. Some people can't. So if you're like, Gabby, I need to try this unsustainable plan because you have reason to believe that you can make a major schedule shift and stick to it, awesome, try it. That's another example where have a contingency plan in case you can't, right? That's completely up to you. But what's not completely up to you is if you make a plan where you're going to do something at 8 o'clock in the morning, but you know 40% of the time you get client meetings or work meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, that's an example of unsustainable where you can't control all the factors. And in that case, I would say instead of having a backup plan, maybe have a different plan. Another example of that would be if you need to do something in the morning, so you are asking your partner to do all of the kids' school drop-off and pickup where normally you split it, right? That's not sustainable, and you're asking somebody else to shift things pretty significantly for you. That works in the short term, and the people in your life absolutely should be willing to support these changes you want to make. But again, that's what I mean by not sustainable. You can't do that all the time. And if the change you're making requires that you shift something in a major way and you do it 5 days a week, again, you're not going to stick to it. And once you start failing, that's actually where you get so used to failure that you give up. And instead, you want to build in small wins for your goals. So set your goals smaller, make sure that you're scheduling them in a sustainable way, and make sure that you have a backup plan. Also, celebrate those small wins. So instead of saying, I'm going to do this 57 times, just say, this week I'm going to do this 3 times. I'm going to try and do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but if Wednesday slips, I know that I can do it Thursday at 3. That way you get the wins under your belt and you don't see changes as failures. You see changes as things that you can adapt to because you've built adaptability into your system. Making something new in your life is all about creating sustainable systems. That's all it is, and having adaptability. But the best way to have adaptability is to know what your contingency plan is. Do you see how this is all coming together when it comes to planning? But I do want you to make sure, I'm going to go back to something I said that was based on a huge assumption, which is that make sure that the new thing you're building in your life isn't always your last priority. It has to be really high up on your priority list in order for it to be a change that you stick to. Because that's the other factor is, first is the sustainability that we talked about, right? Making sure you can actually accomplish it. But second is making sure that you've given it enough priority in your life. I'm going to use the example of a friend of mine. And every year he said he was going to take an acting class. And every year we had all of these issues. He was on call. We worked in technology. And he never ever made it to his acting class because it always came after work. I don't mean just came after work in the day. I mean it came after work in priority. So the other way to get your resolution or goal to stick for the year is to make sure it has the appropriate priority in your life. And it can't always be the last priority. Until it becomes a habit, until it becomes part of your base schedule and pattern of behavior, you have to give it a higher priority than other things. So while I'm saying you have to make sure it's sustainable, you also have to balance sustainability with priority, meaning you can't schedule it after everything else because then you'll never get to it. So you do need to make temporary sacrifices in order for it to be part of your schedule. But once it's part of your baseline schedule, it will be easier to keep it going. What do I mean by baseline schedule? Right now, you have a schedule that's probably focused around work, kids if you have them, and if you already have fitness in your life, then fitness is already part of your schedule. If you think about that, you're like, oh wow, I have adapted my schedule around what's important to me, right? So if you're adding in another dimension of what's important to you, let's say you focused on work and fitness so far, then you might need to add in family and not have those other things slip. So it's just like you're kind of balancing two things and you're adding a third thing you're balancing without letting the other two things slip. That's going to take some new muscle memory. It's going to take some new adaptability, but I know that you can do it. It is possible. And if you've ever learned to do something like juggling or cooking where you're having to like balance a bunch of different things at the same time, you know what I'm talking about. You know that at first it was like, oh my gosh, I have to think of like all these different things. It was a little hard at first, but once you got used to it, then that's your new normal. This is the same thing. When I talk about balance, I'm just going to reiterate this. It's about making sure that you're adding the new thing into your life without completely sacrificing one of the existing things and doing it in a way that you can make sure that you can juggle these 3 balls going forward. right? You can deal with work, fitness, and family. Honestly, most of us are defaulting to two things, and at some points in our lives, just one thing. I know I've mentioned before that work was such a huge part of my life that I literally had no room for anything else. Health and fitness, literally feeding myself in a healthy way, relationships, everything fell by the wayside because I was working 60 to 80 hours a week and was so stressed out I was crying all the time. I had no room for anything else. Don't be me. Don't do that, right? You have room for 3 things in your life. You can do it. So work might need to come down in priority, but you can't stop going to work, right? So we talked about sustainability. We talked about having a backup plan, and now we've talked about making sure that the new thing is a high enough priority. And if you really think about that balancing or juggling 3 balls analogy, that's a really good way to look at it, because you might be like, why is it so hard for me to add this 3rd thing in? Or, oh my gosh, I find these other 2 things slipping. That's where it becomes important to just have a regular check-in with yourself. That would be my 4th tip for making sure that your resolution sticks, is checking in with yourself. And just like you would at work, do a little bit of an inspect and adapt. I've been trying to do this new thing this way. Is it working? Right? So at the midweek, just make sure you're on track for the goal for the week, but also like every week or every 2 weeks, just check in and be like, okay, this is how I've been executing this new system. Do I need to make any adjustments to make it more sustainable? If you think about it that way, then you're giving yourself grace for the fact that adding this new thing in is difficult. And if it's not working, you can make adjustments, small adjustments, by the way, because sometimes it really is just building up the habit. And just be honest with yourself and make sure that you've got the motivation to stick with it. When you do that check-in, that's when you anchor back into, why am I doing this new thing? Why have I added this new thing into my life? Because that why is what keeps your motivation going. So make sure that you're anchoring back into the why of it. Why are you doing this? When it gets hard in month 2, when you've slipped a little bit, then the why is what gets you back on track. And don't see slips as failures. That would be my next tip. A lot of times when we make a slip, we're like, oh no, I failed, I messed up. And then you start defaulting back to what you did before. And instead, just be like, yeah, I didn't do it this time, I'm gonna do it the next time. Then you don't feel like you're restarting. Because that's what happens, is that when we see a slip as a failure, then we feel like, oh no, I have to start all over again. Instead, think of it as anything else that's a habit. If you forget to cook one day, you're not like, I guess I'm never cooking again. Right? It's kind of the same thing. Just I didn't cook that day and now I'm going to cook the next day. So whatever your new habit is, do that. Now let's talk about examples of habits that aren't as concrete as like fitness and going to the gym. So maybe you're a creative person, or maybe you are focused on learning. So sometimes things you might be adding into your life are related to classes, or they might be related to creative goals. Sometimes those are the hardest to get started. They're very intimidating. When you are working on a creative goal like writing a book, there's actually this fear of failing at doing it while you're doing it, right? Like that's where a lot of writer's block comes from, for example, is a lot of writers struggle to force themselves to sit down and write because they're constantly afraid, well, what if I sit down and I can't write anything? I'm going to use the gym analogy again. I can't help it. It's like going to the gym and being like, wow, this workout's really hard, right? Well, if it's hard, you keep doing it. It's the same thing with writing or some other creative goal. The important thing is that you set the time aside and then sit down and make the attempt. And give yourself grace if it is something that's more nebulous, like a creative pursuit or like learning a new skill, that as long as you're putting in some of the effort in that time, it doesn't have to look perfect. This is getting back to overcoming perfectionism in the how we do things. This is a great example. So let's say that it's writing. In the writing community, we often reassure people that brainstorming is writing, daydreaming is writing, outlining is writing. It's not just about word count. So that's true for anything that you're creating. You don't have to have the finished product. Let's say you're, designing something. You don't have to have the finished design in order to have made progress on it. So combine a progress mentality with a letting go of perfectionism mentality, and know that just spending time doing the thing is doing the thing, if that makes any sense. Now, the other pro tip I have is, let's say you're adding multiple things into your life. And I'm going to use myself as an example. This year, I'm building my business. I'm doing a bunch of things that scare me. I have lost a bunch of weight last year, so I'm learning how to do maintenance on my weight. That's actually my baseline for the year, is building the business, doing the things that scare me, maintaining my weight. That's my baseline. I'm also doubling down on my creative activities, and I'm rebuilding my social network and my community after my divorce. I'm doing all of those things at the same time. And I always am, right? So when I wrote, most of the books I wrote and did my fiction podcasts where I had, 25 actors every year, which was a whole other story in of itself. That was a lot. I was also working 50 to 60 hours a week at a corporate job where I was building a new business unit and running a consulting practice, right? All at the same time. So I'm used to juggling a lot at the same time, and I'm used to doing a lot of adding in new things into my life. Here's how to make that work. This is one of my weirdest tips, because this is going to go against everything I say during productivity or everything you'll hear about productivity. This is about having a balanced life and building balance in your life, okay? So let's say that you have your baseline of job and food, whatever your baseline is today, and you're adding in new things, or you have goals to enrich the things that you're already doing. One of the ways that you make that work is to actually give yourself options. And that's going to sound scary to some people, because when you have options, that's where some people get stuck. But hear me out. I promise this works when you're adding in some of these creative pursuits, or some of these more soft pursuits. So let's say my goal is about exploring and learning and building community and relationships and doing my creative pursuits. I might say Monday at 6 p.m. I'm going to sit down and write. But if I don't sit down and write, I'm going to take a class. Or I might do the reverse. I might say Monday is my day that I go take a class. But if I don't take a class, I'm going to sit down and work on the novelization of this other thing that I did. Either way, I win. So this is actually for my people, and I know there are some of you out here because some of you have told me this. This is for my people who struggle to do something because they actually don't want to do that thing in the moment. Frankly, very creative people often have so much creative energy and ideas that we bounce around from thing to thing. Okay, so here's why this works. Because a lot of times you might not feel like doing the thing in the moment. And I'm going to tell you the opposite of what a lot of writing advice is. Because a lot of writing advice is if you don't feel like writing, sit down and write anyway. That does not work for me. Now, I might sit down and brainstorm anyway. I might sit down and outline anyway. But if I am not in the vibe of actually making words, if I force myself to write, it's crap. And I'm not a very good editor. I write better when I'm writing what I feel like writing. So if I set aside writing time and I don't feel like writing the project I'm supposed to be writing for, I'll try, But the important thing is to not get discouraged. So if the thing that you intended to do in the moment doesn't actually work in that moment, and again, if you work in a creative field, this might resonate with you, then that's where giving yourself choices actually works so much better. But they can be completely unrelated things, right? I might need to redecorate my bookshelves, and that's on my mental to-do list, and it's on a lower priority, but it's there. So I might sit down and write and be like, this is not working. Well, instead of frustrating myself and feeling like a shitty writer, I'm gonna go reorganize my bookshelf. Then I've done something on my to-do list. Right? And that's another joke in the writing community, is that the best way to get errands done or to get housework done is to sit down and write, because you'll immediately pop back up and wash the dishes, right? But if you look at it in a more positive way, at least you got the dishes done. Apparently they weren't getting done outside of that time anyway. Does that make sense? So this is really specific, again, for the creatives or more nebulous pursuits like learning. I may not walk away, let's say I'm gonna sit down and I want to learn about cameras or something, right? Well, I might sit down and I might go down a rabbit hole where I've learned about, the new telescope and how much better it records, these redshift lights in stars. Well, you know what? what? That's okay. I've learned something. So I guess what I'm saying is don't be too perfectionist about like how you approach learning. If your goal is learning, be okay if you learn something else. The problem is that we get so tied to capitalizing our productivity. We think productivity has to be all about something that we can make money off of, or that supports something that we can make money off of. Does that make sense? So like, I want to learn for the sake of learning. I don't have to just learn things that support the financial health of my channel. Like if my goal for the year is to learn 3 new things, I'm going to leave it at 3 new things. It doesn't have to be 3 new things that make money. And that's really the heart of whole life productivity, which is what we're focused on this year, and designing a life of meaning and purpose, is letting go of the idea that everything you do has to make money. It doesn't. Just do the thing because it means something to you. Do the thing because you enjoy it. Do the thing because it matters to your heart or your soul. That's meaning. So hopefully you've chosen resolutions and goals for the year that nurture you as a whole human. And everybody always asks me about work-life balance. So I'm going to say the key to the work-life balance is prioritizing things that don't have anything to do with work, that nurture you as a human being. So if you're watching this because you wanted to know how to stick to your New Year's resolutions, I'm going to ask you, do you know why that's your New Year's resolution? Is it a big why? And if it's health and fitness related, good, get healthy. If it's learning related, good, learn. Hopefully you're not getting healthy to make money, right? Same thing with all the other dimensions of life, whether it's spiritual, relationships, learning, creativity and expression, service, all these different dimensions of life, they make you a whole person. And so as you look at your New Year's resolution, hopefully you know what your deeper why is, and hopefully you know how it ties into one of these areas of meaning. So I hope this video helped, because whatever your goal is for the year and whatever your resolution is, I hope that it is meaningful to you as a person, as a human being, on your journey to be a more fulfilled person in your own life and to build a life that matters. And in one of our productivity videos, we talked about how creating or joining a supportive community helps you stay engaged. I'm going to say that that's completely true of any goal, even if you don't think of it as productivity, because it's really about how are you accomplishing that goal? How are you balancing your life? I'm going to invite you to join our whole life productivity series. It's completely free. I do weekly lives. I have supplemental sessions that talk about designing a life that matters. And again, this year we're calling the series Whole Life Productivity. But it's not about producing for the sake of work. It's about creating a life that you can care about. And whatever goals you've set for this year, join a community of people who are also working on goals in one of these 6 dimensions. We plan for a productive week. We plan on how to check in and sustain these life changes or life additions that we're making. And we cheer each other on, because being your own cheerleader is super important, and it's also really helpful to have other people rooting for you as well. I wish you the best of luck in 2025. I'd love for you to tell me what your goal, resolution, theme, intention word, whatever it is, I'd love to hear about it. So drop it in the comments, and I'll put a link in to our event calendar so you can keep up with our different sessions that we're doing that's all about building amazing lives together and checking in and supporting each other with our whole life productivity. So follow the link, sign up for our newsletter, keep up with our events, and I'd love to see you in our Sunday sessions. And if Sundays don't work, leave me a comment, because I know Sundays don't work for everybody. So if I need to add another day, I will. Honestly, service is so important to me, and it means so much to me that I can be here and cheer you on. And I can be here and give you tools and structure and support on how to make meaningful changes in your life. I have done this for myself. I've done this year after year after year. It took me forever to stop just working and to add in these other dimensions, but I have a system that works, and I'd love to bring you along. And especially since this year I'm changing so much yet again, because for me, life is all about change and growth, and I'm going to keep changing and growing. I'm never done. We're all a work in progress, and I'd love for us to do that work together. So I hope to see you in the sessions. Thank you again for joining. If you found this video valuable at all, please like and subscribe, and consider supporting us on Patreon, because I'm offering these free workshops, but I'd love to know that they're helping. Have a great year. I'll see you in the next video.